2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Alright, hello everyone. So, just to clarify, before I start this whole video process and everything that I'm going to present today, I want to make it clear that I'm reading from a script throughout the whole time, and I know it is very obvious, but I think my argument would be best presented if I read off the script than not, and also it'd be very difficult to try to memorize the whole thing because it's very long, so I thought I would let you be aware of this before I start so that you don't get annoyed by it, because personally it annoys me too, but I don't really know what to do. So without further ado, here is the video. As a quick disclaimer before this video begins, I'd like to say that I am merely an 18-year-old with a slightly more than adequate understanding of American politics and history. In no way am I some political guru who claims to know all of the answers to the issues with how our government is structured or operates. However, I've spent a few years developing opinions through thoughtful discussion and research that I would like to present today. I've been wanting to do something like this for quite some time, but it wasn't until the outbreak and the stay-at-home orders until I finally got the push to make this video. This all being said, I believe it is safe to say that we as a nation find ourselves in a time with an extremely polarizing divide in American politics. Not to say that we haven't had worse times in terms of strife within our own nation, but it looks as if this could be the worst it has been in recent history. Whether it be keyboard warriors on the pages of Facebook, the professors in college classrooms, or even just an extended family member at the Thanksgiving table, there's no denying the fact that the American people feel very strongly about their beliefs and the political parties that they identify with. Not to say that having opinions and beliefs that you enjoy defending is a bad thing, as it creates room for civil discussion and forward thinking, but I believe it becomes dangerous when we begin to identify more with a political party than our own beliefs. I also think it's important to note that this kind of social group identity has been a part of American politics for a very long time, and is put upon us from a young age with the prevalence of the two-party system. I say this to make a point that the increasing divide in our political climate today is directly related to the influence and control of the two-party system and our specific government structure, which seems to have done more harm than good in recent years. We have multiple examples of different party structures around the globe that we can learn from, whether or not people want to believe that they are stable or not. However, before I begin to formulate my argument, I believe it is important to do a quick context of how we got to where we are today in terms of the two-party system. So the U.S. Constitution was written with the intentions of there being no political parties, as our founding fathers found them divisive and unproductive. In fact, George Washington warned the United States in his own presidential farewell address of the dangers of a two-party system and avidly promoted unity and forward progress together. Needless to say, the American people did not heed that warning. With the Articles of Confederation not being nearly as good as our founding fathers hoped, 1972 saw two political parties quickly rise in support. You had the Federalist Party, which supported the ratification of a new and better Constitution, giving a central government much more power over the United States. And then you had the Democratic Republicans that advocated for states having their own designated powers over the central government. The new Constitution was ratified, and the Federalist Party began to lose support after an inability to support the War of 1812. The next set of political parties were the Whigs and the Democrats, and their main set divide was over the Bank of the United States and its role in serving the American people. These two parties butt heads for a long time, but the Whig Party was split over the issue of slavery come the 1850s. From the Whigs came the Republican Party, which adopted Whig ideals with one major difference: slavery opposition. This is the first point in American history that we have the Republicans versus the Democrats, but the party's grip on the United States truly began with Reconstruction in the post-Civil War South. 1896 to 1932 ushers in a wave of progression with issues such as women's suffrage, business regulation, and segregation being a spearhead. Once we get to 1933, the issues shift to dealing with the Great Depression, moral majority, and an extreme uptake in destroying Jim Crow America. 1933 and on sees a lot of major issues that I won't get into, as I was just trying to merely give a summary of the two-party system within America, and I feel like the system we have today was pretty established in the mid-20th century. I think it's also important to note that the two-party system has worked extremely well in the history of the United States. Just doing a quick summary of it all makes it clear that this is the case. However, recent years have just brought an unprecedented stagnation within American politics due to the two-party system, and the divide seems to be growing more and more within each year. It's definitely safe to say that our country has seen much more divisive times in our history than we are seeing now. I mean, we were literally killing each other on the battlefields during the Civil War, which was a necessary conflict for progression as a nation. The difference today is that the nasty back and forth between the two parties isn't nearly as necessary as it was back then. I'm sure there are many people in this country that would refuse to befriend someone if they were aware of their political affiliations, which is so unbelievably backwards and divisive, it's hard to comprehend. Obviously, it's completely unrealistic for everyone to agree on everything, but it has been proven time and time again that civil discourse is the best way to go, which can only be achieved if there is a mutual respect between the parties involved. Respect that is definitely not present today. It's also not like the public is unaware of the increasing political divide in America. A study done by Pew Research in 2020 shows that 91% of United States adults see a strong conflict between Democrats and Republicans, which, as you can see from this graphic, is so much higher than every other stereotypical conflict in America. Not only are the American people aware of the divide, but they're also worried about it. A similar study done by Pew Research in 2018 shows that 65% of United States adults are anticipating an increase in political division, and 48% are worried about our political leaders' capability to solve the nation's biggest issues, which I think is a result of the polarization of the candidates that each party puts forward every election cycle as well. Thinking back to the 2016 election real quick, how many people did you hear say, "I don't really like Trump or Hillary, but it's really going to have to be about picking the lesser of two evils"? I definitely heard that multiple times, and it says a lot about the current political climate in our country. It seems as if the two dominating parties constantly pick their most polarizing candidate out of fear that if they pick a centrist, take Marco Rubio for the Republican Party or Martin O'Malley for the Democrats, they would lose to the opposition. At the heart of it, I believe that expanding the political landscape of the United States would do so much to alleviate tension and ultimately give Americans more hope in their country's future. It's not like there aren't other parties in America currently, it's just that they usually have little to no effect other than splitting votes and disappearing. Richard Hofstadter put it best when he said the role of third parties is to sting like a bee, then die. A concept we usually see with parties such as the Greens and the Libertarians. So where do we go from here? Well, there are a lot of options and possible things that we can do as a nation to achieve an expansion of the political parties, but I believe one of the best answers is a solid proportional representation system. I was pretty uneducated on proportional representation until I really started looking into the other options for a party system in America. I highly recommend this video done by J.J. McCullough if you would like to dive into the hypotheticals of proportional representation in American politics, as I really enjoyed it and it helped me formulate my argument in this video. That being said, let's dive into what a proportional representation is and why I believe it would alleviate a lot of tension and conflict that is currently present within the two-party system. There are about 85 or so countries that are currently using proportional representation within their government structure, which means there are many different ways to go about it and a whole bunch of different modifications done to make it best fit for the country that's practicing it. So I'm just going to give my best generic definition of the system instead of going into all the minute details that would differ from country to country. At the heart of it, proportional representation uses the popular vote as the ultimate deciding factor for electing officials into the government. Say that there is a country that has 100 seats in their parliament, and there are 10 political parties running against one another for seats. The country in question would have to determine a threshold percentage for each party's set of candidates to reach in the popular vote in order to get seats in the parliament. Let's say that this hypothetical country sets their threshold to 5% of the popular vote. This means that any one of those political parties only needs 5% of the popular vote to respectively receive 5% of the seats in parliament, ultimately giving representation to even the smallest of political minorities. What usually ends up happening with an election process like this is that there are two main parties, usually affiliated with the left and right sides of the political spectrum, but then there are a large group of smaller parties with their own platforms that usually advocate for specific issues. The two dominating parties would only make up probably 60% of the popular vote, which means the other 40% goes to smaller parties, ultimately giving representation to a larger scope of people. A system like this could allow for there to be many different options for voters come election seasons, taking away from the stress of picking a party that you don't completely agree with or voting for a candidate that you would rather not but you usually would anyway because you're worried about the opposition winning. Obviously, the United States doesn't have a parliament, so in our case it would be for seats in the House of Representatives, which admittedly would make electing a president a huge headache. In their own right, majority and minority leaders would become somewhat of prime ministers within the United States. However, I think the most important thing to remember is that the candidate that ultimately wins the presidency would be the best possible representation of everyone within the United States, due to the fact that the seats would be occupied by so many different political affiliations. There are a lot of correlations between countries having an overall happy population due to the fact that they have a proportional representation system in their government structure, and at the end of the day, I believe that it would do wonders for the citizens of the United States. Personally, I get very stressed every time the partisan conflict is brought up in conversation, and I think it's ultimately because there's a very real and passionate hatred between both parties. Just like in war, there are two sides in America, and not picking a party makes it seem like you don't care about your country or the progress within it. All I'm saying is that it isn't a war if there are 10 sides, because a 10-sided war would be impossible to fight. The solution would instead have to be compromise and unification. In his farewell address, George Washington beautifully states that the unity of government which constitutes you one people is now also dear to you. It is justly so, for it is the main pillar of the edifice of your real independence and support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of the liberty which you so highly prize. This begs a question that I'll ultimately let you find the answer to yourself. Is our society and ultimately our government truly unified underneath the two-party system? I understand that the rhetorical question I just asked can be taken many different ways, so let me be clear. By unification, I don't mean that everyone should have the same beliefs and agree on everything. I simply mean that we should be unified even with our varying and complex differences. Everyone on this planet is human, and no matter which way you spin it, that means that at the very base of our existence, we are all equals. Sure, there are rich and there are poor, first world and third world, young and old, and a wide variety of races, but that does not take away from the fact that everyone has a right to their own beliefs and opinions. Similarly, everyone should have the right to defend their beliefs and opinions. However, this does not mean that we should instantly discount someone just because we don't agree with what they are saying. Instead, we should engage in conversation, have civil discourse, advocate for progression, and most importantly, show love and respect for one another as fellow humans. Obviously, there are outliers. It is almost impossible to show love and respect and listen to someone with very extreme beliefs that are intrinsically and morally evil, but that is not what I am talking about. There are Americans that on a daily basis verbally attack people that aren't too different from them simply due to the fact that they have a different political opinion than they do, not even giving the other person a chance to explain why they believe what they do and have civil discussion about it. There is a lot of power by simply saying, I disagree with you, but I am willing to listen to what you have to say. If we lived in this way, we would be able to progress much further, be happier individuals, and even, make some more friends. Whether the solution to all these problems is a change in political structure or a change in social interaction within the United States doesn't really matter. All that matters is that you as an individual practice these things. Form your own opinions. Question things that other people tell you. Have good and meaningful conversations and do so civilly. At the end of the day, I'm an 18-year-old registered independent that hasn't even casted his first vote, and I'm sure that some of my opinions on this subject are willing to change at some point, but I feel like I owed it to my conscience to share my beliefs one way or another. It wouldn't be right to end this video without practicing what I am preaching. If you disagree with anything I said, I urge you to reach out and we can have a conversation about it. But for now, I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes on American politics, in hopes that you will carry this conversation into your own lives and really consider what I am ultimately saying here. There are many men of principle in both parties in America, but there is no party of principle. Alexis de Tocqueville. Thank you all for your time, and if you made it this far, I am thankful that you find my opinion important enough to have checked this video out. And I guess that all there is left to do is say bye. Alright, the script is done. It's over. It's not scripted anymore. I'm sorry that I was looking at a script the whole time. It feels less personal, but I meant everything that I said. And, consider it. This has been fun. I hope you had fun too. So yeah, I'm gonna go now.